بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أهلا دكتور أمل.
أهلا وسهلا سارة، شكرا جزيلا. السلام عليكم جميعا. أنا طبعا معليش كتبت الكلام قدامي عشان ما أغلط بالعربي. السلام عليكم جميعا، وسعيدة جدا بحضوري معاكم هنا اليوم، وأتمنى إنه الأفكار والأشياء اللي أقدمها لكم اليوم تكون مفيدة. وأنا حقيقة عايزة أخذ الوقت ده عشان أشكر سارة وهاجر على المبادرة التطوعية في بداية اللوك داون. كانت خير جليس، وشاركت في كم لقاء منهم كانوا مفيدين جدا، وفكرة بجد خلاقة وممتازة خالص. فاليوم مشاركتي معاكم عبارة عن هي أفكار وخبرات عن النشر أثناء الدكتوراه، تحديات وأمال. شكرا سارة على الترجمة. والمحاضرة حتكون باللغة الإنجليزية، بعدها حيكون عندنا زمن كافي للنقاش والأسئلة، ودي ممكن يكون بالإنجليزي وبالعربي as you like. تمام؟ طيب هنبدأ. I will start. I will share my slides، وبعدين هعمل switch للكاميرا عشان you just focus on my slides, and after that I can switch the camera again. Okay? So I'll make a start by sharing my slides.
ومن وايل خلينا نبدأ السيرفي.
أوكي حلو تمام.
الآن حيجيكم السيرفي، رجاء جاوبوا عليه، وحنطالع النتائج بعد كذا دقيقة. إذا تشاركي أمل السلايد.
أيوة طيب زهرة معاك السلايدز؟
أيوة تمام.
أوكي تمام. طيب okay. So the topic is publishing during the PhD, opportunities and challenges. Okay, so Sarah have done the introduction already, but what I thought is I will, sorry, I can't move the slides. Let me just check again. Yes, okay. But what I will give you an involvement with PhD journey in general. So first of all, I completed my PhD in 2015, so it's not very long ago, from University of Salford, and I was supported by the EPSRC, which is the Engineering and Physical Research Council, and the title of my thesis was Implementing Green Business Models in the UK Construction Industry, Opportunities and Challenges. While I was a student at Salford University, I was actually the president of a student chapter. So it's almost like a voluntary role. And in that role, I have been in the role for 2 years. And in that role, I was doing some support for my peers in a way, social and some academic support as well. And after that, I started my academic career in 2016. So I was lucky enough to be actually a second supervisor at the start of my career, and she completed her PhD in 2017. So that gave me a really good exposure to the PhD itself. Currently, I'm supervising 3 PhD students, and also the final role, which is really give me a very good exposure to the PhD journeys and how PhD operates within the UK context, is I was the co-faculty head of research students in our faculty, which is the Faculty of Art, Design and Humanities. We have got over 100 PhD students, and that role was from 2017 until literally the 31st of August 2020. So that role was very strategic role within the faculty. And I was more focusing on the kind of the capacity building of our PhD students, looking at the support to them and so on and so forth. So my experience, let's say, and my thoughts today are actually based on those experience and those exposure, starting from a PhD student until I become someone who is overseeing PhD students within our faculty. So for this session today is really let's say three parts. The first one is talking about the opportunities and why it's important to actually publish and think about publishing while you are doing the PhD, not after you finish the PhD, because you will definitely do that. And I will talk also, I will touch upon the challenges, what are the problems, and how you might overcome them and think about them. And finally, I'll give you some practical tips, again, based on experience, based on what I have seen is working, based on reflections and readings. And of course, you can always tailor those practical tips. So just before I start, if I could get like a little bit of maybe, yeah, some typing, or even if you want just to share few words. So if you are a PhD student already and have published your research before, if you can just type or even talk, just open your mic and say some words to describe your experience. So I'm really interested on positive and negative words, because I would like to see if you have done this before, what is your experience?
يلا نفتح الشات. Please, if you have any experience, just type for us. MashaAllah, Amal, now we have 70% voting.
Okay.
And from this 70%, there is a good percentage who has published already.
Oh, fantastic. That's really good.
Yeah.
So definitely we can get your experience then here, and you can give us tips as well. So
have you been rejected? How many times been rejected? For example.
That's actually a very good one. The rejection is definitely an important aspect of it.
Should I ask the question again, Amal, please?
Yes, please. Yeah, okay, yeah. So if you are a PhD student and published your research before, would you please type or share some word to describe your experience? It could be positive and it could be a negative word. So it's absolutely up to you.
Yeah. So we got Muhammad here. He said he had a good experience in publishing in Arabic, not in English.
Okay, okay. That's actually also one of the really important things. So for me, I always wanted to publish in Arabic, but actually never happened to me. So
he's the opposite.
Okay. Any other words before I just move on? Anything else?
I think we got Muhammad for now. That's it.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, no worries. But just feel free if you want to type anything to describe the experience, that would be good. Just again, for me to understand as well. So it's always beneficial. Okay. So before actually talking about the opportunities, the challenges, and the practical tips, what I would like to do is just to give a little bit of really important consideration when we think about publication during the PhD process. The very first one is actually your discipline or the subject that you are coming from, because really disciplines are really different, and each discipline have got its own, like, let's say, rules and conditions and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying with my session is to actually give as much generic advice as possible. And after that, you are the one who really know your discipline very well, and you can tailor that advice based on your discipline, okay? And then also the second important consideration is actually your own requirements and your own objectives. Let's say, for example, most of the students who are in scholarships, most of the time is actually required from them to publish during the PhD. If you are, let's say, someone who is an academic in your position, or you just came to do a PhD and after that you're going back to your own academic discipline, then again, the expectation that as an academic, you will have publication as well. And the third important consideration is the PhD stage. So really, if you are at the very start of your PhD, it's a little bit more challenging actually to publish if you are just starting your PhD. So my advice always, when you start your PhD, try to ground yourself at the beginning, try to understand your subject really well, read as much as possible, as really wide as possible, and focus on understanding your discipline, your PhD, your gap, and so on and so forth. And then the best time, from experience, the best time to start thinking about publication is when you hit your second year, or when you actually, let's say, complete your transfer viva, or it's called at some point, I don't know, the names are different, but anyway, it's that progression point when you complete, let's say, the very first milestone within your university. So that would be the best time to actually start thinking about publication. Okay, so just bear those consideration in mind when you're taking my advice. Okay, so now let's talk about the opportunities. Why we should bother about publishing during the PhD. The very first aspect and the biggest opportunity is actually you get feedback, you get an outside perspective. So PhD is usually a very lonely journey with your supervisors. And most of the time you are like really so close to the PhD itself. So sometimes having that outside perspective is really important during the PhD, because it will help you when you reach your final stages of your PhD. You will see how others would view your PhD. And the second one is a very good practice to actually start writing using the discipline. As I said, disciplines are very different. And once you are in a habit of reading and looking at the review of other scholars, what they have done, you will start to notice there is a language, there is almost a discipline that, or the way that is being written, there is kind of like certain, let's say, language, certain ways of doing that. So it become, let's say you become to start to use your own academic language and the discipline, and that will give you really good training and good boost as well. And it's a development opportunity. So definitely going through the process of actually sending an abstract, and then you get some feedback, and then let's say submit the final or the whole paper, let's say if it's a conference or if it's a journal, or maybe it's just a workshop to give an opinion on something. So that again, it's a very good process to learn from it. And I think it's really crucial within the PhD, you go through that process. And again, it's an opportunity for research sharing and dissemination. PhD is really focused time to do something very, very specific over, let's say, if you are full-time, typically 4 years, if you are part-time, more than that. And it's really good to kind of like start sharing your research and disseminate about it and talk about your research and what are the contribution likely, what are the gaps that you have found, what are the themes that have been discussed before, and where is actually the contribution of what you are intent to do. So again, that dissemination and sharing is really important. And I think one of the biggest important things, actually it contributes to a better viva. So when you reach, let's say when you have written your thesis and then you have gotten a statement within your thesis saying, okay, the original contribution to knowledge is supported by such and such, and you put the publications or the contribution that you have done during the PhD, that actually give your examiners a lot of, let's say, lot of confidence, and they think, okay, yeah, someone has looked at this work outside the supervision team. So it's definitely a good opportunity as well. And there is something which I didn't mention here, but just literally it came to my mind. When you publish during your PhD, you have got an opportunity to get really good feedback from your supervisor, let's say. They will definitely support you and help you to be able to publish. So I think that again, that's an added bonus, because let's say once you have finished your PhD, you might not get that opportunity again. You might not get someone else to look at your work at the beginning before you actually sending it to the, let's say, the outlet that you are planned to send, okay? So hopefully those opportunities and those ideas are giving you a little bit of encouragement, even if you are not thinking about it. Now you could say, actually, yeah, I might get this benefit or that benefit, okay? And now, okay, let's say I'm convinced, I'm definitely doing it, but what about the challenges? What about the problems and how to overcome them, okay? One of the biggest challenges is definitely time, because once you have decided to publish, it actually is not fun, especially at the beginning. It's not fun at all, because you will need to do several drafts and you have to do rewriting and writing. At the beginning, especially the first experience, is definitely daunting and difficult, but it gets better by time. It doesn't get easier, but you get better on it, and you kind of like learn through doing it. And again, close to the time, the effort, and that's why I was saying it's really important to actually know your objectives and maybe look at your PhD stage. So for example, if you are in the writing up, you need to kind of like make that decision. Is it better just to focus on the thesis itself, submit it, and then after that think about it, or how I would manage that, how I would manage the time, how I would manage the effort to do it. Okay. Let's say you manage to do it and you have submitted, okay. Another big challenge is actually addressing the reviewer comments and feedback, because most of the time, I think it's very rare that you would submit something and you say, okay, it's been accepted without anything or without any comments or without any feedback. I think that's very, very rare. Most of the time you would have, let's say, comments or feedback to address, and actually addressing that, it's really difficult also at the beginning. So those challenges, you just need to take them into consideration when you are thinking about actually publishing during your PhD. And then finally, the last challenge is actually sometimes, even if you go through all this, you might get rejection or complete rejection from the beginning, or they'll say, actually, no, this does not fit, so it will get rejected. And that, I think, most of the time is really, really hard for PhD students. It happened to me once when I was a PhD student. I applied for a conference, I remember. And for me, the idea was perfect. The theme was perfect. Everything was fine. And I get rejection. And for me, that was really, really difficult, because I thought my the whole PhD is rejected in a way. So the main thing when you look at rejection, just do not look at it as almost like my whole PhD is just, it doesn't make any sense, or something like that. No, sometimes it might not fit, let's say, that outlet you have sent it to. The reviewer might come from a certain discipline, so they did not get your paper or something like that. So just do not take it as a rejection for the PhD itself, okay? So hopefully this gives you a little bit of, knowing the challenges, then I'm sure you will be able to deal with them. But if you know them from the beginning, then you will definitely build some time to be able to deal with those challenges, okay? And now if I start with a little bit of some practical tips on actually where to publish, okay? I always start, I would say, or I would recommend, or I would suggest to start at local levels. What I mean by local levels, let's say within your department or within your university, you will always find maybe some seminars, or let's say some kind of like speedy lectures or something that actually to go and is not kind of like, let's say, the traditional form of publication, but it's form of disseminating your research. So definitely take those opportunities and start from the local level, because you will start to kind of learn getting the feedback and thinking about it and answering or responding to those feedback. So it actually gives you a little bit of a start ahead before you go to, let's say, the other outlets that may be relevant to your discipline. And I would always recommend that to go for peer-reviewed, either conference or workshop. So whenever you want to submit something, try to go for peer-reviewed, because with the peer-reviewed, you get a review, you get feedback, you get comments. And that's what you need during your PhD. It's very important to be able to polish your work, to rethink about your work in different ways, okay? And also sometimes within some, let's say, conferences or workshops, or even maybe journals, I think, you will find there is a dedicated track or sessions for PhD students. Again, those are really, really helpful, because they have been designed to help PhD students. And I think those are really good ones. They will still acknowledge that you are a PhD student, and usually the review may be more friendlier, let's say, compared to a standard academic or something like that. So that would be, again, a really good point as well, or a starting point. And now with COVID-19, so I put virtual conferences and workshops because we have seen like lots of them with COVID-19. Again, I would recommend to go for those, again, to try something a little bit more new. You might not always get a chance to present in a virtual environment. So if there is an opportunity, definitely take it and go for it. Okay. Then again, continuing on the practical tips and just thinking about some action plans, ideas, and you can think about those in terms of your own discipline, let's say. One of the things I would always recommend to be very explicit with your supervisor and telling them that you are really keen on publication, and think about having a publication plan, okay? Even if you don't stick to it, at least if you have a plan, you would know, okay, maybe in the first year, I might actually look at the literature review. The second year, if I have got, let's say, interaction with my field of research, then if there is something coming up, I might do that as my publication. So try to think about a plan, and you can definitely discuss that with your supervisor and try to revise it to revise the plan in year basis. And year one, usually it's very good starting point where you think or you identify, let's say, the relevant maybe conferences, the workshops, the publishers, or if you are someone from, let's say, art and design, you would think about exhibitions. And those you would target them throughout your studies. So because anyway, with year one, you are trying to interact with your field from the literature. So you try to understand who are the authors, what are the publications, what are the outlets for publishing, and so on and so forth. So maybe use that year to identify, let's say, relevant outlets to say, okay, yeah, I'll publish here, or maybe I'll publish there. And the third point is actually to use your progression points. I know, for example, in the UK system, we all within the PhD, we have got progression points. Sometimes it will be in year one, you have a bigger progression point. And then in year two, you have got a little bit of, sometimes it's called, I don't know what the name of it, but it's almost like an annual review. They just to check on you to see that you are going on track and so on and so forth. So try, because you will produce a writing piece for those progression points. So maybe use them as a way to enhance your publication plan. And let's say if you are someone, maybe you didn't manage actually to publish anything during your PhD. Once you submit your thesis, you usually have got maybe around 6 weeks until you get your viva. So that might be a perfect time to actually think about your publications and how you would approach the publication from your thesis itself. And again, it's a positive way of waiting for the viva, because again, during the viva, one of the questions usually about the publication, about the dissemination of your research and what you will do after, let's say, you get your PhD. So that's a really good one to think about it. Another thing, when you are doing your PhD anyway, you're doing literature review, and the literature review most of the time is actually, you kind of look at it every year in a way until you submit your thesis. So having, let's say, what we call it sometimes a systematic or a structured literature review, those are really, really highly publishable, okay? And I just put here a reference that I really find it useful. If you are someone, you don't know what a systematic review or what is a structured literature review, so that reference could be your starting point, especially if you are just starting your PhD. It's a very good one actually, and it's very visual in a way to help you on how to organize your systematic or structured literature review, okay? And again, once actually when you are waiting for your viva, try to think about your publications and see how it fits, because literally you have got everything in front of your eyes, then you could think about what you want to do, okay? I think I just missed one point where when you think about publication, try to think about the major themes within your study. Most of the time, you will definitely have let's say maybe a few themes around your study, or 3 studies or 4 studies around the subject that you want to study. Maybe there are some, let's say, factors affecting X and Y and Z. Maybe you are looking at certain case studies in certain settings. Maybe you are looking at some historical data or something like that. So think about those big themes within your study and use them as a way to think about your publications as well, okay? So my very last advice is actually PhD is really focused time to investigate your subject area in details. So make the most of this focus. Most of the time you would review like lots of literature. Maybe you are sometimes investigating some aspect, and then when it comes to the very end of your study, that aspect might not fit within your thesis. So think about those again as publications, and don't think about them as, actually I wasted my time looking at X and Y and Z and I'm not using it. There is no waste material at all during your PhD. You can always publish whatever you have found or whatever you have investigated, okay? So definitely take advantage of that and think about that focus time. And before I go to the comments or discussions and questions, so what I put here, I'm just sharing my own experience. And I think it actually feels really good when within your introduction section, that page was with my introduction section within my thesis. And when you talk about the original contribution of this study are supported by following publications, and you put your publication there, it feels really good. And as I said, your examiners, once they see, let's say, those list of publications, they are really, they do have, like, let's say, more confidence, let's say, because they think, okay, those ideas and some aspects of the thesis has been reviewed by someone, let's say, external to the PhD itself. So it definitely feels really good, okay? Great, so this is my content for you. So I hope you kind of like found some useful maybe ideas or something that you might tailor. And now I'll open the floor for discussion, questions, comments, anything you want to ask.
Thank you very much, Amal, for the lovely presentation.